Rain fell the night 12-year-old Evan Mercer disappeared, the kind of cold, whispering rain that slides down windows like thin fingers. The small town of Briar Hollow never expected a kidnapping. Its streets were quiet, its people predictable, and danger always felt like something that lived on the news, far away, in cities with too many lights and too many strangers. But on that Tuesday evening, the fragile peace of Briar Hollow cracked forever. Evan had been walking home from his after-school robotics club, taking the same half-mile route he had walked 100 times. At 6:48 p.m., he sent his mother a text, "On my way." At 7:12, his mother stood in the doorway, staring into a rain-dark street where her son should have been. And by 7:45, Briar Hollow police had issued the order that no one ever wants to hear. We have a possible abduction. The first hours of a kidnapping are not frantic the way movies portray them. They are slow, heavy, suffocating. Police set up barriers. Flashlights sweep puddles. Radios crackle with clipped voices. Parents cling to each other in driveways lit by porch lamps. Everything feels thick, like breathing through smoke. Lieutenant Mara Delaney, the head of Briar Hollow's small investigative unit, arrived on scene and immediately sensed something was different about this case. There was no struggle on the road, no dropped backpack, no footprints in the mud except Evan's washed away by the rain. Whoever took him had been careful, too careful for a random snatching. This was planned. By midnight, the FBI had been notified. By morning, the Mercers' home was filled with agents, crisis negotiators, and technicians scanning every electronic trace of the 12-year-old boy. But kidnappings are cruelly quiet in their early stages. Hours pass without answers, without leads, without even a clue that the child is alive. Evan's mother sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of laundry detergent and her son's shampoo. His father paced, then sat, then stood again. The waiting is its own kind of torture. On the second morning, everything changed. At 9:16 a.m., the Mercer family received a call from an unknown number. The voice on the line was distorted, low, mechanical, like a machine speaking English for the first time. "We have your son. He is alive. You will receive instructions." Then the line clicked dead. Evan's mother collapsed into tears. His father nearly fainted, and the negotiation era began. Kidnapping negotiators are trained for this exact moment, the tightrope between panic and progress. The FBI assigned Special Agent Roland Pike, a negotiator with a calm voice and glacier-like patience. He sat with the Mercers, explaining every step. Do not call back. Do not speak directly unless instructed. Keep your emotions contained. Kidnappers are drawn to weakness like sharks to blood. It sounded cruel, but every instruction was designed to keep Evan alive. Hours stretched like rubber bands. The phone sat on the living room table like a venomous animal waiting to strike. Evan's mother watched it as if staring hard enough could force it to ring. And at 4:03 p.m., it did. The second call. This time the kidnapper didn't bother with threats. He went straight to business. $1 million cash, non-sequential bills. You will receive instructions on drop location. You have 48 hours. Evan's mother sobbed. His father shouted that they didn't have that kind of money. The voice simply replied, "You will find it." Then silence. The FBI tracked the call. It bounced through 4 servers, all spoofed, impossible to trace. Negotiator Pike leaned forward, hands interlaced, and said the line every parent dreads. If they wanted him dead, they would not be calling you. They want the money. That means we have time. But time is not comfort in a kidnapping. It is a slow bleed of hope. The news spread. Small towns can't keep secrets, not even tragic ones. Briar Hollow shifted into something colder. Neighbors became suspicious of one another. Strangers eyed each other with unease. Parents pulled their children indoors. Panic creates shadows where none exist. Rumors bloomed like mold. Evan had been taken by a drifter or a jealous student or an escaped convict. None were true. Inside the Mercer home, tension grew thick. The FBI argued that the demand was too high for a family of modest means. The kidnappers had to have known something personal, something intimate. But who? A coworker? A neighbor? Someone who attended Evan's robotics competitions? Every possibility spiraled into dread. That night, Evan's mother dreamed of him standing in the rain, reaching for her through a glass window she could not break. She woke screaming. The negotiator stayed with them through dawn, a silent guardian in a nightmare that refused to end. By the third day, the first major break arrived, not from the kidnappers, but from a gas station camera 2 towns away. At 7:28 p.m. on the night of the disappearance, a dark van passed through the intersection. The footage was grainy, nearly useless, but Evan's reflection, small, terrified, could be seen in the back window for a fraction of a second. That flicker of hope ignited everything. Search teams expanded, highways were monitored, and helicopters swept the woods. But kidnappers with a plan don't slip up by accident. The FBI realized quickly the van had been intentionally placed in view. It was bait, meant to be found. And just as predicted, the phone rang again. When the second ransom call came, the kidnapper sounded colder than before. Impatient, clipped, as if time were running out not just for Evan, but for him as well. 1,036 hours left. Special Agent Pike responded, using the soft, steady tone meant to lower the kidnapper's adrenaline. "We need proof of life." A pause, breathing, something shifting on the other end. Then a quiet, trembling voice. "Mom, Dad, A muffled thud. A shout. Evan screamed. The line cut. Evan was alive, but barely. His mother collapsed into Pike's arms. His father sank onto the couch, shaking uncontrollably. Parents want hope. Negotiators want leverage. And proof of life gave them both something to stand on. Yet, Pike knew something deeply wrong had just happened. Kidnappers rarely let the hostage speak. It risks giving away clues, their location, their number, their emotional state. But what struck Pike hardest was the panic in the kidnapper's reaction. That wasn't acting. That was fear. Which meant someone else was controlling the situation, or the kidnapper was losing control entirely. And a losing control kidnapper kills. Special Agent Roland Pike replayed the call again and again. Headphones pressed against his ears, eyes narrowed in concentration. In the brief 2 seconds before Evan's scream, something subtle bled through the audio. A faint hum, steady and low. Not mechanical like an engine, not natural like wind. Something artificial, something rhythmic. Pike tapped the desk. A generator, industrial machinery, water pumps. He couldn't place it yet, but his instinct told him the clue mattered. Kidnappers hide their identities. They rarely consider the noises around them. Meanwhile, inside the Mercer living room, now transformed into a command center of agents, laptops, and coffee-stained folders, the emotional temperature surged and dipped like a fever. Evan's mother refused to leave the couch where the ransom phone sat on the coffee table. His father refused to sleep. Both parents were fragile, stretched too thin by fear and hope braided together like barbed wire. Pike kneeled beside them. The fact that they let him speak, he explained gently, means they are under pressure. A pressured kidnapper is more likely to talk again, and more likely to make mistakes. Evan's father swallowed hard. But pressure makes them dangerous. Pike nodded, yes, which is why we stay calm. We control the pace, not them. But calm evaporated quickly in hostage cases. At 11:30 a.m., a new message arrived. Not a call, but a video delivered via an encrypted email traced to a temporary offshore server. The thumbnail alone sent a cold wave through the room. A dimly lit basement, concrete walls, a single hanging bulb. They pressed play. Evan sat on a metal chair, hands bound with duct tape, ankles tied. His face was streaked with tears. A blindfold lay around his neck, removed just for the video. Behind him stood a man wearing a dark hood and a black jacket holding a knife angled toward the boy's throat. The voice from the earlier calls spoke from behind the camera. 36 hours. $1 million. Or the next video is the last. The screen cut to black. Evan's mother screamed. His father collapsed forward, sobbing violently. Agents swarmed, analyzing shadows, clothing fibers, wall textures, light angles, anything that might locate the place where the boy was being held. But Pike ignored the visuals entirely. He listened. There it was. Again. That same humming sound from the previous call. Steady. Pulsing. Almost like... He closed his eyes and concentrated. A refrigeration unit? No. Too fast. A ventilation system? No. Too metallic. A water plant? Possibly. He needed more, and soon he got it. At 2 p.m., the third ransom call came. This time, Pike answered directly. "We're working on the money," he said, voice deliberate, warm, calm. "But we need more time." "No more time," the kidnapper snapped. His tone was fraying, less composed than before. "You have." Pike spoke over him, intentionally shifting the rhythm. "If you kill the boy, you get nothing. If you want the money, you work with us. You know how this goes." The kidnapper hesitated. A dangerous but useful hesitation. Pike continued. "We want to help you, but we can't do it if you rush. Give us your word the boy stays alive." A sharp breath from the other end. "My word means nothing to you." "Your word," Pike said, "is the only leverage you have left." Silence. Then, for the first time, the kidnapper spoke without the distorted effect, forgetting, slipping, or simply too rattled to care. The voice was still deep, but admittedly human, tired, strained, trembling with internal conflict. You don't understand," he said. "This wasn't supposed to happen. None of this was supposed to be..." A door slammed on the recording. A second voice shouted, distant but sharp. "Stop talking!" Evan screamed again. Then the call ended abruptly. The room fell silent. Everyone stared at Pike. "There are 2 of them," Pike said quietly. 2 kidnappers, not 1. And they're not in agreement. A divided kidnapping team is the most dangerous scenario in hostage negotiation. When kidnappers fight among themselves, the hostage becomes collateral. Someone to blame, someone to punish, someone to prove a point with. But it also meant something else. One of the kidnappers might be willing to talk. One might even want out. Meanwhile, FBI analysts isolated the second voice, younger, more aggressive. The dynamic became clear. One kidnapper wanted money. The other wanted something darker. But what? The motive remained buried, like a body under cold soil. By nightfall, the FBI uncovered something horrifying. Evan's parents didn't know this, but Evan had recently won a regional robotics competition, earning a small scholarship. Press photos showed him standing with the prize money. Local newspapers posted pictures of him often. To most people, he was just a bright kid. To the wrong person, he looked like someone who had money. Kidnappings often start with a simple, tragic misunderstanding. But as the storm rolled over Briar Hollow that night, Pike sensed something deeper, more sinister. This wasn't just about ransom. The panic in the kidnapper's voice wasn't about money slipping away. It was about time. Something was happening behind the scenes. Something accelerating. And then, at 1:13 in the morning, the ransom phone rang again. Evan's mother awoke instantly. Pike answered. This time, the kidnapper didn't speak. He whispered, "They're making me do it." A thud, a scream, a chaotic shuffle, another voice shouting. Then, gunshot. The line fell dead. The shot echoed in the Mercer living room long after the call went dead. Even though it came through a phone speaker, it sounded too real, too close. like it had happened in the next room. Evan's mother screamed, clutching her chest, collapsing again into her husband's arms. Agents froze mid-movement. A coffee mug hit the floor and shattered. No one breathed. Pike, standing nearest the phone, didn't flinch. His eyes closed for a single second, one brief moment of stillness before he turned to the audio tech team. Trace whatever you can. Anything. Background noise, packet routing, sound decay. I want everything. They scrambled. Then he looked at the parents. A gunshot doesn't confirm anything, he said softly. It could be a threat, a warning, a staged event. They know we're listening. But the parents saw the truth he didn't say. It could also meant their son was dead. Pike didn't allow himself to think that way. Not yet. Not until he had proof. He replayed the last 3 seconds of the call, not for the gunshot, for the breathing afterward. People overlook breathing, the first biological tell, the smallest window into immediate truth. After a real shooting, the person holding the gun usually breathes fast, shallow, uncontrolled, panic mixed with adrenaline. But this shooter, the breath sounded steady, intentional, almost too measured. And after that breath, 2 words, barely audible, nearly swallowed by static. Get up. Pike's heartbeat slowed. Evan was alive. They fired the gun away from him. Why? To scare the other kidnapper? To frighten the family? To accelerate the negotiation? Or, more chillingly, to test something? He didn't know yet. But the kidnapper's earlier whisper, "They're making me do it," kept replaying in a loop. Who were they? Who was he afraid of? Why was he suddenly panicked? The storm outside intensified. Rain slammed the siding, wind battered the windows like fists demanding entry. The entire town felt like it was trembling. At 2:40 a.m., the FBI tech team finally found something. Anomalies in the background hum, variable intensity, slight electrical inconsistencies. Pike leaned over the laptop, scanning the spectrogram. Then he saw it. A narrow oscillation pattern. Not industrial, not mechanical, hydraulic. "It's water," Pike whispered. "But not a plant, not a pump. A dam." The realization sent electric heat up his spine. There was only one dam within 50 miles of Briar Hollow, Larkspur Dam, a decaying hydroelectric structure built in the 1940s. Half of it was abandoned. The turbine room had been decommissioned for decades, but the old emergency spillway pumps still ran on low power to prevent overflow. Those pumps pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat, exactly like the audio. But Pike didn't celebrate. He didn't even smile. If Evan was being held near an old spillway pump, it meant he was underground, in the lower chamber. A dark place, a cold place, a place where screams didn't travel far enough to be heard by anyone living. A perfect prison. He mobilized the tactical team immediately. By 3:10 a.m., black SUVs cut through rain-swollen roads toward the dam. The storm threw sheets of water across the highway, and thunder rolled low and heavy, like the earth growling. As they drove, Pike reviewed the kidnappers' words again. "They're making me do it." Who was they? And then it clicked. 2 kidnappers didn't mean 2 equals. It meant 1 leader, 1 follower. 1 dominant voice, 1 scared accomplice. 1 desperate, 1 trapped in his own crime. As the team approached the dam, Pike radioed HQ. "Find all employees, contractors, or recent workers associated with Larkspur Dam, anyone with access to the lower chambers." Within minutes, 1 name flashed onto his tablet. Luke Mathers, a disgruntled former maintenance worker fired 4 months earlier after a violent altercation with a supervisor. A loner. No address, no next of kin, no digital footprint beyond a cracked old phone and a single bank account drained to nearly nothing. But then something even more disturbing surfaced. Luke wasn't alone. He had a younger brother. Ethan Mathers, age 25, arrest record, petty theft, breaking and entering, resisting arrest. A history of being easily manipulated. Social worker notes from childhood. Displays submissive behavior to older sibling. Follows instructions even under distress. The pieces fell into place like bones clicking into formation. The whispering voice, the panicked one, belonged to Ethan. The aggressive voice, the one that shouted, the one that fired the warning shot, Luke. A dangerous dynamic. A powder keg with a flicked match. The SUV skidded to a halt outside the dam. Rain soaked the tactical gear. The concrete monolith loomed above them, a black silhouette against violent lightning. The old stairwell door to the lower chamber hung crooked on its hinges, rusted and half broken. Pike led the advance. Each footstep echoed through the narrow stairwell as they descended. Water dripped from the ceiling. The air grew colder, denser, and smelled of mold and old iron. Halfway down, Pike raised his fist. He signaled silence. There, echoing faintly up the corridor, was the humming again. The spillway pumps. Rhythmic, pulsing, steady. But beneath that hum, a voice. A male voice. Crying. "Please, I didn't mean to. I didn't mean..." "Ethan." Pike moved faster. The team reached the bottom landing. Ahead, a dim corridor led to the turbine chamber. Shadows from flickering lights slid across the walls as though alive. Pike crept forward. He pressed his ear to the final metal door. Inside, someone was pacing. Heavy boots, sharp turns, breath ragged. Luke. And then, cutting through the hum, Ethan's voice. Weak, shaking, barely there. "Please, I want to go home." That was when Luke shouted, "Shut up! Shut up!" A loud crash, something metallic flying across the room. Pike's pulse accelerated. There was no more time. He signaled the team. 3, 2, 1. The expletive bore exploded inward. Flashlights swept the chamber. Water trickled down the walls. Pipes groaned under the weight of the storm above. A single hanging bulb flickered erratically. And there, in the middle of the room, stood Luke Mathers, broad-shouldered, wild-eyed, holding a gun to Evan's head, while Ethan sobbed in the corner, hugging his knees. Pike stepped forward alone, hands raised, voice calm as rain. "Luke," he said, "listen to me." Luke's gun hand trembled violently. "You move any closer, and the kid dies." Pike didn't blink. "You don't know what you want." And maybe Pike didn't. But Ethan did. Still crying, he whispered, "Luke, please, don't do this." Luke snapped, "Shut up, Ethan! You ruined everything! You always ruin everything!" Lightning struck overhead. The light's chamber flickered. In that split-second blackout, the tactical team tensed, ready to fire, but Pike lifted his hand. Wait. When the light returned, Luke's expression had changed. Not calmer, not angrier. Broken. This was supposed to fix everything. The debt, the house, Mom's medical bills, everything. It was supposed to be perfect. Pike spoke softly. It still can end without blood. But Luke's eyes said he didn't believe in without blood anymore. He dragged Evan backward towards a steel catwalk above the spillway tunnel, a 20-foot drop into violent, churning water. Pike followed, heartbeat thundering. One wrong move, and Evan would be ripped apart by the machinery below. The moment Luke reached the edge of the catwalk, he pressed the gun harder against Evan's skull. "Luke," Pike said quietly, "if you pull that trigger, you lose your brother too." Luke's jaw twitched, because Ethan, frail, terrified Ethan,
had stood up. He was shaking violently, but he rose anyway, staring at his brother with wide, pleading eyes. "Ethan, I don't want to lose you." Luke froze. The gun wavered. His breath broke. Lightning flashed again, and in that exact moment of distraction, Pike lunged. A single, deafening shot rang out. Someone screamed. Someone fell. And the storm swallowed the rest. The gunshot cracked through the cavernous chamber like a lightning bolt shattering the world. For an instant, everything froze. The storm above, the pumps below, even time itself seemed to halt, suspended in the thin, trembling air between life and death. Then, the lights flickered wildly, and the scene lurched back into motion, like a recoiling animal.
Luke Mather staggered, eyes wide with disbelief, blood blooming across his shoulder from the tactical sniper's precise shot. The impact spun him sideways, wrenching the gun from his grip. It clattered across the metal catwalk, the sound echoing through the chamber like the ringing of a long-forgotten bell. Evan collapsed forward, nearly toppling over the edge. Pike caught him in the final second, pulling him back from the abyss with a force born not through strength, but from desperation and something deeper, something bordering on faith. Luke crumpled to his knees, clutching his wound, breath wheezing and ragged. But he wasn't dead, not yet. His eyes darted between Pike, Evan, and the swirling death water below, as though trying to understand which fate belonged to him. Ethan screamed his brother's name, stumbling toward him, but two agents intercepted him, restraining him gently yet firmly. His cries bounced off the wet concrete walls like the mournful howls of a trapped animal. Pike secured Evan, wrapping his coat around the shivering boy. "You're safe," he whispered, though the storm in his voice betrayed how close they all had come to a tragedy unspeakable. "I've got you." But Evan was barely conscious. His eyelids fluttered, and tears mixed with the rain that had seeped into the chamber. I want to go home," he murmured. "You will," Pike promised. "Right now." Medics rushed in, lifting the boy onto a stretcher. Evan's fingers clung to Pike's sleeve for a moment, as if afraid that letting go meant falling into darkness again, before relaxing at last. As they carried the child out, Pike turned back toward the Mathers brothers. What he saw made him pause mid-step. Luke, bleeding heavily, stared at Ethan, not with hatred, nor anger, nor even blame, but with a deep, hollow sorrow, the kind that comes only when a man realizes the path he took is one he can no longer walk back from. A life unraveled, a desperate plan shattered, a family curse repeating itself through generations. And Ethan was crumbling inward. Tears streamed down his face, shoulders shaking. He wasn't crying because he'd been caught. He was crying because he thought the only person he'd ever depended on was dying in front of him. Two broken souls, bound not by blood, but by wounds. Pike knelt beside Luke, speaking softly. "It doesn't have to end this way." Luke gave a bitter, humorless laugh. "It already did. You can still help your brother. Tell us where the rest of the weapons are. Tell us everything. Take responsibility. Give him a chance to live a life where he isn't following your shadow." The idea landed like a stone dropping through water, slow, heavy, sinking deep. Luke turned his head toward Ethan, who stood trembling under the agent's hold. For the first time, Luke's expression softened, not enough to undo the damage, but enough for the truth to slip through the cracks. I didn't want him involved. He followed me, like always. He grimaced at the pain surging through him. "I just wanted the money. Just once, I wanted things to be different." Pike didn't offer sympathy, only clarity. Different doesn't come from taking a child. Luke closed his eyes. A single tear escaped. It was the closest thing to remorse that man might ever give. The medics lifted him next, strapping him to a stretcher as he finally lost consciousness.
Ethan lunged after him, screaming, "Luke! Luke!" But agents held him back. His cries echoed in the chamber long after his brother was carried up the stairwell. The Mathers brothers were taken away, one to emergency surgery, one to federal custody. The dam fell silent, the storm muffling into background static, and for the first time that night, Pike allowed himself a long, exhaling breath. The sky began to lighten as they returned to Briar Hollow. Dawn was bleeding over the horizon, soft shades of blue mixing with the last remnants of the storm. Rain still drizzled down, quiet and delicate now, as though the sky was exhausted too. At the Mercer home, lights flickered on inside as the FBI convoy pulled up. Evan's mother and father burst out of the front door before the vehicles fully stopped. When the medics opened the ambulance doors, both parents collapsed into tears, overwhelming, shaking so bad as they saw their son alive, battered but breathing, blanket-wrapped and reaching toward them. His mother scooped him into her arms, rocking him gently, as though trying to undo every second of the nightmare through pure love. His father pressed his forehead to Evan, whispering something private and trembling. Pike watched from a distance, allowing the family their moment. He never cried during cases, not because he wouldn't, but because he couldn't. When you cry for one family, you open the floodgates for every family you couldn't save, every case that ended too late, every child whose name you still remember in the quiet hours of sleepless nights. But he did allow himself something else. A smile. A small, tired, haunted smile. Because today, the storm ended with life instead of death. Later, at the temporary FBI command post, the debriefing painted a more grim picture of how close things had come to spiraling beyond control. Ethan Mathers, in custody, broke down during interrogation. His story spilled out in fragments: fear, guilt, longing for his brother's approval. He swore he tried to stop Luke. He swore he sabotaged parts of the plan on purpose. He swore the gunshot was a warning fired into the ceiling, not at Evan. And then he said something Pike would remember for the rest of his life. "I didn't want the boy to die. He reminded me of us before everything went wrong." Broken people often hurt the world in the shape of their own scars. As investigators pieced together the motives, timeline, and all the fractures that led to the kidnapping, one truth became painfully clear. The Mathers brothers weren't monsters born from darkness. They were men made from it. Men who drowned in the water they were raised in. But the world did not excuse their actions. Luke, surviving surgery, faced life in prison without parole. Ethan, though less culpable, faced decades. But Evan would grow up. Evan would heal. And Briar Hollow, the little town scarred by storms and silence, would carry this tale into their collective memory, retold in whispers at diner counters and late-night porch conversations. A reminder that evil doesn't always arrive with masks or myth. Sometimes it comes in the form of desperation. Sometimes in the form of brothers. Sometimes in the form of choices made too late to correct. And sometimes the heroes aren't those with capes or spotlights. Sometimes they're quiet men like Pike, moving through storms with steady hands, willing to stare into darkness so others don't have to. At noon the following day, Pike stood alone at the dam again. The storm had passed. Sunlight broke across the cracked concrete and rusted metal. Water roared beneath the catwalk like an endless heartbeat. He closed his eyes, not to forget, but to remember. Rain began to fall again.
gentle, cleansing, like the sky itself exhaling. The wind whispered across the spillway, carrying a simple truth. Some stories end in blood. Some end in silence. And some, rare, fragile few, end in survival. This one, against every odd, belonged to the last category. Pike opened his eyes, turned away from the water, and walked into the daylight.